means, and then you can do that. Right? And that's including question. Oh, but this is not going to take that long, so we're never going to hit that. So it's fine. He's keeping time pretty sharp here. 1 minute 45 seconds, 42 seconds. He's stuck on the well done, sweet. I was pretty frightened by the trains as well, because if you don't bring your cell phone, well, you don't have a ticket. Sorry. Which is going to cause me troubles on my way home, because in Denmark I use Telia as my cell phone provider. They have no coverage here. What? So I can't roam here, I can't get my ticket. I won't get the text message with it. Yeah, you'll see how I do that. Telia has no coverage here. Or rather Telia Denmark. Let's see if there's another Telia here. But apparently they don't work together. Oh, you can't.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. For purposes of syncing the audio and the video, when I say now, it's 15:15. So, welcome to this afternoon's session. I have the pleasure of introducing Tange from Denmark, I believe, who is going to talk about the SnowdenPhone and its implications for democracy activists in Burma. So, please welcome the speaker.
So I'm Tange. Last year I was in Burma, where I met some democracy activists. We have recently had an election in Denmark about surrendering sovereignty. And they had that too in Burma a couple of years ago. But opposite us, they don't invite their opponents out for beers afterwards. No, they treat them quite differently. The couple of democracy activists that I met, they were being, up to the election, they were being thrown to jail, and he had been tortured. And it's not that you weren't allowed to do propaganda. That was perfectly fine. But you were not allowed to recommend a voting of no. So I inquired a bit more of why he had been tortured. It was because of his laptop. There were loads of encrypted files on the laptop, but the regime didn't care about those. They were, however, very interested in this one photo of the democracy group that he had forgotten to encrypt. So who is that one? Who is that? And who is that? Because they of course wanted to interrogate all of the people in the group. Obama says that, don't worry, we only collect metadata. We don't collect the whole conversation. But in Burma, metadata is exactly what is dangerous. Who you are communicating with. The existing cryptophones, they don't solve the metadata problem. They hide the conversation so you can't listen in on what's being said, but you can still tell who's talking to each other. Burma is a poor country, so it was quite a surprise to me that everyone who has a phone that's newer than mine. They're not branded, often not branded phones, they are often generic Android phones. But that got me thinking, maybe we can make an app that makes it possible to communicate without being snooped by the phone company, who, of course, is controlled by the regime. And the basic idea is to record your video, your speech and your photo, and then send that as an encrypted email. The email is sent through the Tor network, and it never leaves the Tor network. Instead, every single phone has its own mail server, so the email will be delivered directly from the sender's phone through the Tor network to the recipient's phone, without ever entering the open, unencrypted internet, and without entering the phone company's mail servers. On the phone there will be contact information, and all the communication is stored in encrypted containers. And you can have as many containers as you want. Thereby you can reveal, if you're under torture, one of these access codes and then claim there are no more access codes. Since not all users are literate, this app must be so simple to use as a normal phone is. On my way back to Denmark on the plane, I was sitting next to this guy from Amnesty International. He said that this app will also be very useful for their agents around the world. The app has to be free software, firstly because the users in Burma will not be able to afford paying for it, but more importantly, free software is currently the best guarantee we have against backdoors in the software. And for security software where your life literally is on the line, then security is key. It cannot be financed by commercials because online commercials may reveal who the users are. Luckily, most of the modules that we actually need for building such an app is already available as free software. There's a Tor client, there's an encrypted SQL base, there's an address book, and there's email encryption. We just need to put them together. And for that, I need help. And that's why I'm here today. I know nothing about app development, but I've described the app in detail on SnowdenPhone.wikia.com. And you're more than welcome to get a hold of me if you know someone who might be able to help, whether it's through financing, publicity, or development. And I could summarize the idea in a small haiku poem. Is privacy key, or are you scared of torture? Then use SnowdenPhone. This completes my introduction, and now I'm going to change and go more into details and have you a bit more active. So the idea is that I want to develop an app, or I want an app developed that can protect my democracy activists in Burma. There are a lot of challenges with that, but there are three major challenges. And the three major challenges is financing this app, getting some publicity on it, and then, of course, getting it actually developed. Before I have a working prototype, I need publicity to attract financing, and I need publicity to attract developers. I also need to have a social acceptance that this app is actually a common good for the society and not something that people should be scared of. After a working prototype, well, obviously I should say after, I need the publicity so that we can get more users and get more feedback on the app so it can improve. There's a social acceptance issues because, well, I think most people, at least in the Western world, will say, yeah, it's fine that the democracy activists in Burma can get this and be able to communicate without the regime being able to listen in. It's also fine if the labor unionists in Mexico can communicate, or the diplomat that might be stationed in China. They're also fine with the activist in Ukraine, and most will also be fine with the patriot in Texas being able to talk to his partners without being listened in. Even the whistleblowers and the journalists in Sweden are probably going to be okay with that. The problem comes when we're talking about the drug baron in Colombia, because this tool will, of course, be able to hide the communication, not only from these people that we agree with, but also from the people we might not agree with. So the question, won't this be able to be usable like for criminals? And yes, it will. And the issue is actually more or less the same as it is with Tor. And the answer is actually more or less the same. Criminals can already protect themselves. They can do that by stealing a phone, they can do that by stealing the identity of another person, they can do that by using vulnerable Windows machines and use those to route their traffic through. And they can actually pay someone to develop some secret software that we will never know exists. So I kind of liken this to a knife producer. A knife, well, of course, that can be abused to kill people, but there is also many legal uses, and it is beneficial for the society that we have knives. And I must ask, where is the software that protects the citizen? Because I don't really see that. After a talk on from the tour project, they met with a Syrian woman who had been at the talk, and she actually thanked them for her life. She could not have gotten independent information on the situation in Syria without risking getting killed. And the reason why she could that now is because of the talk. And I see that SnowdenPhone can act as the same role, but it will not be on the laptop, it will be on smartphones instead. My Burmese democracy activists, they're poor, they don't have 100,000 euros to pay to develop a piece of software like this. So they won't be able to produce that even if they have the need for it. And this is where I would like to have your comments on this. Well, how do you see that we could get some publicity on this kind of thing, get some social acceptance? Do you have any ideas? Because I'm really, really open for ideas for getting this off the ground. Yes.
Crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding. That's a good idea. That I will cover that under financing. But I can see that could also give some publicity as well. I'll just continue that. Because financing is the second problem. It is really hard to attract competent volunteer developers if you can't pay them. And there will be very few developers who will need this software themselves. There's not going to be a lot of developers who's going to sit in countries where they have this problem. And if there are, they can often find other ways around that using SSH or similar things. So I see there will be a need to pay at least for part of the development of this. Currently, I don't have an estimate for how much it's going to cost to develop. I can see it's not something you're going to do in an afternoon. But my guess is that this is going to cost 1 to 2 main years. But again, that's just my guess. I'm really, really welcome if someone who has experience with producing apps could come in and get better feedback on what is this going to cost to put these modules together. So the financing could be Kickstarter or crowdfunding or something similar like that. And having looked at Kickstarter, that seems that there's definitely requires some preparation. It's not something you just do. Something where you need to have like a semi-professional video that people would like to spread. And if we're going to go that way, then we need someone to help us make that. There's also going to be a fee for Kickstarter, and the last time I looked, I think it was around 15%. Maybe that's worth it, but it's something to take into consideration as well. There could also be organizations that where you could get the money from, but that will require that you have contacts inside the organization and that you're allowed to come and present the project to them. It also requires that this communication has reasonable communication skills, because one of the things they're going to be asked if they go public that they've supported this is that aren't you producing software that criminals can use? So they need to be able to deal with that and say, well, this is like the knife producer. Foundations is another source of income. Again, that would require contacts, and it will require knowledge about which foundations exist, how do you send in a proposal, and how do you get a grant. And that is also a lot of network, and if any of you know someone who knows how to do that, I would be very happy to get in contact with us. So, looking at the organizations, there are some pretty obvious ones. Human rights activist organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the Danish Institute Against Torture, and maybe there might even be some offices in the EU that is looking at human rights. There are also the freedom of press issues with the organizations that's dealing with that. So there's Journalists Without Borders, WikiLeaks, SAFE Initiative, International Media Support, and what's the CPJ? I don't really recall what it is now. But there might actually be others there as well. I don't have contacts in any of these, and if you have contacts in similar groups, I would really, really like you to help me reach out and say, well, could you somehow, if you find this is a good idea, could you somehow help us through this? There's also the anti-surveillance crowd, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who had made Tor. And since this builds on top of Tor, maybe there might be an opportunity to have them take part of this as well. In Germany, they have the Digitale Gesellschaft, and in the US, I'm sure there's going to be some patriot organizations that's very, very much anti-surveillance and who might actually also have them. Do you have any other ideas? What else could we do to find this? Yes?
I thought if you need programming help, you could always reach out to the CCC in Germany.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea.
And they probably do it for free because they have this ideology and this goal. Contact them, something with them.
Yes, do you have any contacts inside CCC? Because it's so much easier if you're contacting an organization. It's so much easier if you actually already have someone who knows someone inside the organization, so you can go to the right person in the first go, right?
I don't know anyone anymore, sadly. This could be arranged.
Yes, and if any of you guys have contacts in the CCC, please let me know. Because that's a good idea.
Yes. I have a unique chapter, so I can post a link to them and ask them for help.
That would be wonderful.
Anyways, the German CCC dedicated money to, I think it was to Edward Snowden itself and some other organizations recently. So if you get a grant from Edward Snowden personally, it would be even more easier if he would mention your project in any case.
Yeah.
Project Applebaum or so.
That's a good idea. Yes?
If you need a video, I can even help you with that.
Brilliant. Please give me your contact details afterwards.
I think crowdfunding is probably the best idea because then companies, organizations, and so on actually can come in and crowdfund it and support you via that. And you don't need to use Kickstarter. You can use something similar.
It was just the first one to mind, right?
No, the Red Phone and the Tech Secure developers, have you tried or have you talked to them or you had some encounters?
That's actually not a bad idea. You can contact them and say, well, your projects are good, but they don't solve this issue, right? They don't solve the metadata issue. Do you have any contacts with them since you're bringing that up?
Not at all.
Okay. And again, if any of you guys have any contacts at the Tech Secure and Red Phone, then it would be wonderful if you could give me in touch with those. At the end?
Again, pushing for crowdfunding, and the good thing about that is that it's self-aware, so to speak. There was a movie here a couple of years ago. They started, I think, 5, 6, 7 years ago with just a text page saying we want money to build or make a new sci-fi movie. And that escalated so much that it basically ended up on the top 5 lists of most viewed movies of the year, just a year ago. And they raised a lot of money just by starting with a text page. So it snowballs. So both the economy and the publicity is kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, and I think you're right that if you get the publicity, the financing is not going to be that hard. Yes?
I just remembered, recently talked to some people about they are going to resurrect a service we had in the 90s when you sent an email address to the service and got back the website. It was a website for you and sent it back. And they're going to resurrect it for your target audience, or people who are, for example, in Syria and want to get independent information, so they can send give me cnn.com and get it back. And perhaps
actually, I think that part seems to be more solved by Tor, because that's really, really easy to use. You just click around, and you don't have to craft a special email. So that specific thing, I think, is.
I don't think so. If you don't have a reliable internet connection, it's not working for you. So this solves this problem. And And the other thing is the social acceptance. I'm not sure if it's still a problem in the Western world. I can only speak for Germany, but I come to the conclusion there isn't so much a problem. I have nothing to hide, so I have nothing to fear. It's gone. It's definitely gone after Snowden in the German mainstream.
But you also have a much better history on that record, right? You've a much better record.
Better, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas in Denmark, it's like, give us more surveillance, please give us more. Right?
So as already said, just rely on German groups for this, and perhaps you get free.
Something else to consider, Tor isn't that safe anymore. The Tor nodes can be surveyed, and therefore you should probably consider not using Tor and using something else similar.
The reason why I've chosen Tor is that Tor actually has a pretty good track record. If you look at the Snowden documents, Tor is one of the things that they had a really hard time cracking. Using something completely different, that has not been field tested. And as long as, again, I'm saying we build on top of Tor, we don't integrate completely with it. So it's not going to be that hard if someone else can provide the networking layer and then change it out with something completely different. Good. 10 minutes, brilliant. I would like to know how you would like to be involved and how you would like to help. There are some, in the development, there are some goals, and I'm just going to run through the components that is in the goals. So most of these are modules that can already be used. So it should be easy to use, meaning that an illiterate person can use it as well. And it should, by default, have, there should be, by default, no unencrypted data on the network, no unencrypted data on the phone. And since I'm not a security designer, I would prefer that we use some existing algorithms, some existing software that's already usable. We need plausible deniability. We know that people using this can be tortured, and they need somehow to be able to protect themselves. Maybe there should be a panic button that if you press this, it will actually erase everything. You should be able to partially get access on the torture, so maybe you have 2 of these containers where you can get access to one of them. It should work over bad network connections. When I was in Burma, it wasn't uncommon to have 50% packet loss and 100% milliseconds latency. They need to be able to use it out in the jungle where there's no reception at all. So they need to be able to open up the conversation and see what we have talked about. They need to be able to take some photos and put it in the outbox so that it can be sent when they get internet access. There's some bit of time not goals. It's okay if in the first version you cannot communicate with people you don't know, because they need it for communicating inside the group. So it's fine if they have to meet up and exchange keys to be able to use this. And in the first version, I don't really see that we need to have live speech. It's fine enough if we only have recorded speech. If there's an easy way to implement that, that would be wonderful, but that's okay to wait until the second version. And the same goes for group messages or email business.
A question?
Yes?
Wouldn't it be simpler for the first part only to have something like text messages
Yeah, but text messages and MIME-encoded video is more or less the same. That's not that much of a difference because it's going to be sent an email anyway. So anything you can attach to an email, it's going to be fine. So the account container is the central storage, and that's going to contain your key ID and all the communication to and from this key ID. Meaning that you can have several groups that you're part of. So maybe I'm part of this group here, and I use one key ID with you guys. But I'm also part of this group, and I use a different kind of key ID with these people, and they don't necessarily know each other. Whereas you inside the group know each other, and you inside the group know each other. You can have multiple containers so that you can give in to pressure, and you can create a new container easily. I'm not really going to go much into this, other than saying that they know that when the ground is burning, they know if the grease is after them. So it's okay if you have a timeout that you can stretch, that you can put that down when we know that there's going to be a problem. Adding contacts, since this should be easy to use, I'm thinking that adding contacts should be using QR codes. So you have a way of showing your QR code, and then you scan that, and then you have a link combined between you two. You should also be able to forward the contact details through a common friend. So if we have a group here, one of you guys can actually invite one of those guys. Since you're not going to be online all the time, you're going to have email buddies, so that if email is sent to you, they will try to send it to the secondary email address, secondary email server, if yours is not online. And the same goes for backups if you want a backup on your phone. You'll do that afterwards. So the communication is going to have a timeline with communication events. So maybe it's documents, maybe it's sound, maybe it's video, maybe it's images, maybe it's just text. There's going to be filtering, so you can see which date it's from, which recipient it's from, and you can easily search this. And you should be able to attach notes to this. The reason why you need to be able to attach notes is that if you have a sound message, you need to be able to put some text on it, because that's not going to be something that automatically converts sound to text. So that you can search for it in this conversation. Every phone is going to have its own Tor mail server. It's going to work as an MX backup, so it's going to be able to work as if people can't access one phone, they will use another phone to relay through. And it should be able to reject emails that's not meant for me or for the people that that's my backup buddy. Yes?
You state in the second bullet point, Mesa versus MX backup for selected clients. Why do this? Why not just saying I will work as MX backup for anybody? I don't care anyways, it's encrypted.
Yeah.
So nobody has a problem that he has to make friends with too many people to come and play with service.
I think that needs to be field tested whether we make that decision.
Okay.
I'm definitely open to changing. And that actually goes for everything here, that these are my ideas, and I've tested it on most of my friends, and they have improved a lot of these ideas. They were crap when they started out, they've been better now. And that might actually be an improvement as well, but that would sort of depend. Spam filtering, if that becomes a problem, then we need to figure out a way to reject people where maybe they're going to say, you can only send to me if you're in my contact book, otherwise you cannot. Or there might be other ways to do that. Again, that's something I'm seeing in version 2, because in version 1, let's just get it off the ground, right? And then in version 2, we can worry about it.
Can I ask one question? You had
Yes.
2 slides back. You were saying that you want to reject messages that the user has already seen.
Oh, yes.
So if I'm with the adversary and I capture messages and I replay them, I can tell what people have read. I can tell that the user has accepted a message from someone. And that might be information you might not want to expose. So the phone should behave the same whether or not, whatever I throw at it. It shouldn't tell me that something has happened with this information that I don't know what it contains, but it tells me that the message has been looked at.
that I can see your argument. I can see from a security perspective you're definitely right. Whether that is worth that in practice remains to be seen, because you're going to tie up more bandwidth. If you have 3 backup bodies, 3 email bodies, you're going to get the same message up to 3 times. And then you're going to waste 3 times the bandwidth. So again, that's something that needs to be field tested.
And you should probably just leave out this whole backup thing and just drop messages that cannot be sent.
The reason why we need to have the email backup is because I know that these people are out in the woods often. So we cannot assume that both the sender and the receiver will be online at the same time. That's not a safe assumption. So, the good part is that a lot of this software is there already, right? So there's a Tor client for Android, there's an SMTP server. Unfortunately, it's on-free software, but again, we need the SMTP server to handle some specialization, so maybe that's not a big issue. There's the address book in Android, that's also free software. There's a camera app, there's a speech recording, there's an email app, all free software. There's GPG for encrypting, and there's an SQLite crypt that might be useful as the container. So all of these things already exist, and I think that's wonderful to then use these modules and just tie them together. And I think that's about it. So questions? Give me everything. Yes.
What about getting the stuff off the phone? So if I get a video and want to publish it to media, how do I get it out of the container?
It's a good question. Let's think about that. Yeah.
What do you do if people block SMTP? Sorry.
This is through Tor. So you need to rock Tor, and that's pretty hard to rock.
Okay. What do you do if so people are buying their phone in Burma, right?
Yeah.
You said they were mostly unbranded. You have no idea what factories they come from.
Yeah, they're Android phones. That's what we know.
So you're relying on phones that were made in Burma to run.
Well, they're made in China, but yeah.
What if the hardware has been logged, or there's something in the operating system that?
So that's a really good, that's a very valid argument, right? Because the hardware could be bugged, the fundamental software operating system could be bugged, and that's absolutely true. Those are risks, but this project does not mitigate those risks. We're simply saying, well, we can't deal with all risks. We're going to deal with the risks that if we don't have this, they are going to take the GSM phone and make unencrypted phone calls. And that's what we're trying to mitigate. That's the risk we're trying to look at. There are other projects that's actually looking at that. So the Replicant project, I can highly recommend that. They are looking at specifically that issue. Looking at the hardware, they're looking at the OS level, and SnowdenPhone should definitely be able to run on Replicant. Right? So yes, your concerns are valid. But they're outside the scope. So, because they're going to be inside the scope of Replicant. Yeah?
Have you seen the black phone?
I have read the vaporware about the black phone. I've never seen it in real life. And that might go in the right direction. From what I could tell, they still use things like text secure and red phone, which means that it's not going to cover the metadata. Yeah?
How about in the US, they have something called guilty by association.
Yes.
Meaning that if you have encrypted stuff on your phone, you are guilty and get punished for it. They don't really care what it is you have.
Yes.
Just that you have something.
So it's not guilty by association, it's guilty by having something that looks weird.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is that a problem?
Yes. But it's a smaller problem than actually being guilty by association, because if you can't open the container and you as the secret police can see I'm communicating with all these people, that's by association, because then they are all guilty, right? And that we're trying to protect against guilty by association, and maybe that means that we're going to be guilty by having something encrypted on our phone, and we will have to deal with that. We're trying to mitigate that somewhat by having several containers, and maybe one of the containers is very innocent. Right? So when you're talking to your parents or something very simple, it's going to be in the container that's innocent. So when you're being tortured, you're going to say, well, I can give you the password, it's 123 mom and dad. right? And then it opens up and you can see all the conversation you had with your mom and dad, and there's no big problem, right? And so we're trying to mitigate that, but we can't mitigate it completely. Yes?
I think you make a good point that actually this project would benefit if you could run it on a regular phone. So you don't see visually that it's actually a special kind of hardware. Because, as you pointed out, it should look like innocent, like
Precisely.
a stock firmware, basically.
So the idea is that we run this on normal Android phones. Right? There's going to be a specialized app, but there's so many specialized apps, right? So a specialized app, but running on Android. Maybe replicant. Yes?
Well, if you consider that, that people use this app in their everyday use, that app will be safe because, as you say, you can use the phone to the app to actually just call your parents.
Yes.
So as the app becomes more and more popular, the app becomes more and more safe.
Yes. There's a safety in numbers. And if we can somehow make this the new Facebook and this is the way you communicate with your friends, that would be wonderful. I have a hard time seeing how we can do that, but it would be wonderful if we could.
Well, if you make it that, that just you probably just need like an interconnection for it. Then you can replace fiber and similar stuff, phone calls, and then it will suddenly become really popular because hey, you don't have to pay for expensive phone fees.
Yep. There are definitely some interesting lessons there that we might be able to. Yes? I think we're more or less out of time.
Actually, I'd like before to use that 10 minutes.
Oh my god, they just raced through this and we still have 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah?
You have a good thing with the backup bodies there? The email backup bodies?
Yeah, actually, now that we have 10 more minutes, then let's just go. Let's just emphasize what was this backup body, because there are actually two backup bodies.
Yeah.
There's one that's the secondary email.
Mm.
So if, that's 125, sorry, there. So if you need to communicate with him, and he's out in the jungle, then when he's back, you're going to be out in the jungle. Well, you can't communicate. Luckily, you have a common friend, right? So when you email him, it will not go through. But he has mentioned that I'm his email body, which means that you can send, if you can't reach him directly, obviously you're going to try that first. But if you can't reach him directly, you're going to send you an email through my server. Since it's encrypted, I cannot decrypt it, I can just pass it on. And you're not going to send it just to me, you're going to send it to a few of these backup buddies, so maybe you and you, right? So we're each going to have a copy of the message. Then you go off into the jungle, and when he gets back from the jungle, we're going to try to deliver to him. Right? Because luckily we are online, actually you are in the jungle too, but we're still online, right? So we're going to try to deliver it to you. So we're going to try to deliver this message twice. And maybe that's a problem bandwidth-wise, and that's why we have this. Maybe we should reject it. Well, maybe we should just accept them and say, well, here it is. That's the email body. There's also a backup body. And the backup body is for when your phone gets wet or gets taken by the police or similar. And you need to have all your data back. Then you can take this container and say, well, you are my backup buddy, which means that he will get a backup of this phone, of the information on the phone, and it's going to be encrypted with my key, and it's going to be encrypted with his key, so we need to be tortured, both of us, before we can open it. So when my phone has gotten wet, I need to go to him and say, well, can I get it back here? Yeah, question there.
This body thing sounds a lot like meta information to me, like.
Yes, and it is.
But isn't that what you criticize on Text Secure and referendum?
Yeah, but who has access to it? And that's the key point. Who has access to this meta information? Well, in this case, only we have access to it. With the Text Secure and the Red Phone, the phone company or the internet company have access to it. And that's a key issue, right? That's the key difference. That the metadata is still going to be there, but it's going to be under our control, and no one else will be able to see it. Huh?
So then you have two key features with these body systems that will give you safety in numbers. Because in a society where you have a shaky internet connection, this will be, if you can't trust that you're gonna, I have friends in India, they were very happy when they got fax because, wow, now people can fax us. Oh shit, we have to have both the phone line and the power up at the same time at both endpoints. They never got a fax.
That's a brilliant example. Yeah.
Yeah, but you have a similar feature here.
Yes.
That you can't phone each other because either your battery will be out or one of you will be in the jungle or whatever. But this way you can send a telegram.
Yes.
Via the
Actually,
email
that's a very
backup.
good analogy, Gia. Say it's a telegram, because it's sort of one way, right?
Yeah.
You can return it to live, but it's not live. We're not talking live conversation.
So it's and it's secure at that, and you have a backup system integrated at that. So they are good selling points.
Your phone gets read. The phone has your key, right? What else has your key? How can you decrypt your backup if you lost your phone?
Yeah, okay, so how can I encrypt my backup if I lost my phone? In the backup is going to be an encrypted version of my key that is going to be able to be decrypted with my passphrase. So my backup body will have a copy of my key, but it will be encrypted with my passphrase. So you need his password and my password. Basically, that's what you're going to need to decrypt the backup. Yep.
No, I just wonder about your background, and are you like from Denmark? Where from in Denmark? And
so why am I? What gives me the right to stand here? First of all, what gives me the right to stand here is that I'm a human. I've met these people in Burma, and that has tortured me deeply. But secondary, I am an IT professional. I've earliest been part of the security business and built with IT security. So I have a background in that. I do not have a background in apps at all. So there are many key issues with app development that I know absolutely jack shit about. And that's why I'm here and trying to recruit some of you guys, either directly or some of your friends. Right? Because it might well be that you know someone who actually has the knowledge that I need. Does that answer it?
I was thinking about the University of Copenhagen, for example, like getting a course leader interested in doing a work or something like that, like people into internet security.
Yes, I see your point that maybe we could get some students working on this, right? The problem is that for this, since we're talking about security where people's life are at stake, I'm going to be somewhat reluctant with that. At least I need someone else to be able to review that their code is going to be safe and not full of holes. That's the one issue. The secondary issue is that I used to work at Copenhagen University, and it's really hard to find the right people to make a course on this subject. Right? It's not impossible, but it's really hard to find the right people. And that's again where I'm saying, maybe you have people in your network that are the right people. Yes?
You have a nice idea, and I can say that it's not a new idea. Technically, all of them are possible.
Yes.
I mean, we can solve all the problems, technically, if we think about it. But the main problem with your project is that it's not simple. Do you have any idea, I mean, how difficult it is to write an app like through Telegram, which just send a normal text message via web server, via a server? I mean, do you have any cost estimation of the project?
Like I said earlier, no. I have no experience with app development, and I have no experience in figuring out how much this costs. So if you know anyone who has experience with that,
I
put
can
in
say that
contact
it
with
costs
me.
a lot. I mean, technically, all of the story is possible to.
The beauty of this is, as you say, there are no unknowns.
Yes.
These are, we know we can do this. It's not something where it's...
Evil is in the detail, and I'm quite sure that...
There might be details that's going to be hard, but there's nothing here that cannot be done.
Yeah, sure.
And my guess is that this is going to cost 1 to 2 million years. I might be off on that, very much off. And again, that's why I'm asking you, asking your network is someone who can give me a better estimate. Final question, maybe? Final question.
I'm thinking you're maybe overreaching for the very first version.
Yeah.
You're trying to get too much done.
I have the
If
same feeling.
people on the net is going to do this, they're going to need a very small set of requirements. The absolutely demanded stuff, the core part. From that, you can build reasonably quickly. But if anyone on the net comes and says, oh, that SnowdenPhone, that sounds interesting, I want to help out there. And they see page after page after page after page of requirements. They're going to see, I don't have time for this. I don't have the energy to do that.
I understand.
But if I see 5 reasonably difficult parts.
Yes, and I understand that argument completely. And that's why if you go to Wikia, SnowdenPhone, wikia.com, you will see that this is actually divided into chunks. And that's exactly for that reason. So that if you, maybe you're not a UI designer, right? Maybe you're the guy who knows all about mail servers. Then you can deal with the mail server and say, that's the small, tiny task that I'm going to deal with. And then leave the UI design to someone who actually knows what they're doing with UI. And so if you go there, you can see that I'm really trying to make it into modules where you can attack each module individually and then put them together at the end.
Open source doesn't work that way, unfortunately. You have always, in all startup projects, you have 2 or 3 people that does all the work. I've never seen a project where you have 10, 15, 100 people working on different parts.
Yes, yep. And that's exactly what I'm saying, right? Because I'm saying, I don't think that this is going to be a volunteer effort. At least not completely. I'm hoping that CCC might, but I'm having my doubt, right? I think it's more likely that we're going to talk about 1 to 2 man years that's going to be paid to deal with this. Because that's what I think is realistic. I might be, I'm hoping that someone can prove me wrong, but my guess is that we're going to have to hire people to do this. And there's going to be this core team of 2, maybe 5 people that's going to work, maybe not a full year, maybe half a year each.
So, I think that concludes the question. Wonderful to see such engagement from the audience, wonderful to see such discussion. I hope you're pleased with the reactions as well. So let's thank the speaker. And next up in this room is Richard Jonsson, or Johansson, I don't quite remember, sorry, who's going to talk about some of the challenges in natural language processing. That's next up in 15 minutes.